Coming up this week on Sporting Journal Radio.
Ron Linder saying, John, we got to do an interview with you. You're a good stick. You know, I didn't dare tell the dude. This is like the 50th walleye I've caught in my life.
Big one being the elimination of the shotgun only zone, Dan.
I mean, I could have died 6 hours ago and she wouldn't have known.
Largemouth, smallmouth bass fishing is going to be continuous now.
Looked him straight in the eyes and said, sir, I'm flying you to your just reward. Hell.
Broadcasting on the Sporting Journal Radio Network, wherever you get your podcasts or watch on YouTube.
Fish on right now.
Well, we're here at the 2024 Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. And our guest now is Jeremy Smith. I fish, I hunt, and always will.
Just to look out for your everyday hunter, angler, and trapper that's out there.
A Fish Hunt Forever production. This is Sporting Journal Radio.
Well, some big news for hunters and anglers in Minnesota and the upper Midwest region. We're going to break down all of that stuff coming up this week on the show. Plus, we got John Bergsma from the Great Lakes Fisherman's Digest TV show. Also, Joe Henry going to join us. I'm Bret Amundson. That's Dan Amundson. What's up, Dan?
Hey, we are, you guys get this podcast a day early because we're on our way to the middle of nowhere, and I cannot wait.
Another trip to Canada. The Canadian trips begin for the year, Dan.
Yeah, and I hope I'm gonna, as soon as this comes out, our entire family is gonna be on the road to join us. So I'm gonna send this to them. I hope they're listening, and if they're listening, we'll find out when we meet up with them because they can make a comment about this. So maybe I'll give you a password and I'll give you a beer or something. But if you don't listen, you don't get it. Sucks.
You're gonna bribe our family to listen to the show.
Yeah, well, you know what? If I had if everyone who truly tells me they listen to the show actually listened, we'd be rich.
Yeah, well, that's pretty common in today's world.
Well, we're gonna fix it.
So thank you for listening, whether you're family or not. We do appreciate it. And we do bribe non-family members once in a while with prizes.
Yeah, well, I just want to make it clear. My beer offer is to family only. So don't just send me random messages saying, I want a beer. Well, too bad. So off the air, before the show started, John Bergsma told us a story about his dad in World War II that absolutely was amazing. It involved D-Day, and since we just went past June 6th here, first of all, thank you to all the veterans, current and former, and of course those who lost their lives protecting America and Canada for that matter. Thank you very much, and we have just an amazing show. We're going to see if John will tell that story on the air later in the show, because that was wild. Yeah, it's what we thought was going to be a basic fishing report turned into a much longer conversation.
So we're gonna see if we can keep John on the show longer than originally planned. And I've heard he's a good storyteller. So we'll have John coming up later in the show, and we'll have a Lake of the Woods fishing report as well. But a lot to get to, Dan. Before we get into there was a special session in Minnesota, a couple of things on the docket, including removing the shotgun-only zones in Minnesota, year-round bass fishing, the Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund, which personally affects us, full disclosure. We'll talk more about that and what got passed in that special session. But first, Dan, who are the sponsors this week on the show?
Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world. Plan a trip to Lake of the Woods this summer at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. OnX Hunt. See private land boundaries, offline maps, and more. Take 20% off a new membership with the code SJR20. Haybale Heights Campground and Resort. Fish Devil's Lake this summer. Learn at Haybale Heights. Learn more at haybaleHeights.com. Tasman Lake Lodge. The camp opens up here soon. Catch world record lake trout and giant pike at the Saskatchewan's Tasman Lake. Learn more at TasmanLake.com. Prairie Sportsman. The new season is over, but you can watch episodes anytime. The Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel. And Trails End Outfitters. Trophy bear, walleye, and whitetails in Saskatchewan. Learn more at trailsendoutfitters.com.
So excited to get up there. The crew has opened up camp. The headlines.
At Tasman.
Yeah, the headlines have opened. Headlines are brought to you by Tasman Lake Lodge, by the way. And the crew went up there and opened up camp. They did a little bit of fishing. They said the water levels are up higher than last year. Also, they got a couple of inches of rain, so there's no fire danger around the lodge, which is nice. Pretty interesting story about some of these wildfires in Canada coming out. We're just hearing rumors and different things. A couple of people in Saskatchewan did get charged for intentionally starting fires. That we do know. We've heard different things about the Manitoba fires and some of the Ontario stuff, but man, Man-made, a lot of these fires up in Canada were man-made, whether intentional or not. Some started by vehicles, trains, things like that. Some people doing some burning when they shouldn't be. But things are looking good up at Tazen. You can see some pictures from the fish that they've already caught on the Tazen Lake Lodge Instagram and Facebook pages, and go to tazenlake.com for more details. All right, why don't you hit that headline sounder since we plugged it?
Headlines.
So Minnesota had a special session, and as of this recording, Governor Walz hasn't signed these bills yet, but he said he expects to. So maybe by the time you're watching this, all these things have been signed. But a couple of things, with a big one being the elimination of the shotgun-only zone, Dan.
Yep, we talked about it last week, and it looks like that has passed. It's awaiting signature now. So I want to make this clear. We got a bunch of comments. We shared a clip of our conversation about that last week on our social media, so you can always see some highlights of the show each week on our Instagram, Facebook, TikTok pages. We shared some of those. We got a lot of comments, people concerned in the southern part of the state about safety, and I just wanted to make it thrown out there that the shotgun rule was never put into place as a safety thing. It was to make it a little more challenging for deer to get harvested down there. So if you're worried about safety, Wisconsin's been doing this for a while. Just about every other state around us that has a lot of ag country and a lot of flat ground, they don't seem to have too many issues with fire or with rifles and bigger guns. And heck, people are using muzzleloaders that can shoot a long ways. There's people using shotguns that feel pretty comfortable shooting longer than I shoot with my deer rifle. So it never was a safety issue. It was more of a herd issue. So
yeah. Well,
go ahead.
Well, and people are using rifles for coyotes. Granted, it's a lot lower number. I've had a few people actually put a poll up on my Instagram story asking if you were okay with this. It was a little bit closer than I expected. It's only 63% voted yes on my story that they were in favor of removing the shotgun-only zone. Of course, it still comes down to the counties, but my biggest thing is it comes down to hunter safety, like everything else, and the deer drive situation is where I could see there being any sort of issues. Otherwise, we're generally up in trees. We're generally bow hunting. But if we do shoot, a rifle at something, it's going to be at a downward angle. So as always, please be safe out there. But it was never meant to be a safety issue. As Dan said, it was always more to protect the deer herds in open country since they have less areas to hide at. Yeah,
and like I mentioned last week, keep this real quick, there are a lot of deer drives that happen in Wisconsin with rifles. So
for sure,
I wouldn't be too concerned.
Man, we grew up rifle hunting in Wisconsin, and I still remember a couple of times when we were hunting private land and big groups had come do deer drives on our property trespassing while we're in deer stands.
Yeah, it's the Wild West.
It's crazy. Anyway, sounds like Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund is going to be approved, which is good news for us since that's how Prairie Sportsman is funded. And a number of projects, Dan, as you know, it's to the tune of $100 million a year or something like that. They fund environmental projects around the state of Minnesota. So there's some good ones out there, including some deer studies.
Yeah, I was reading through them this morning, and I didn't get through all of them because there's so many. We can put the link to this omnibus bill, the Environment and Natural Resources Appropriations Bill, in the comments. So you can read through it. It's a whole bunch of political and legal jargon, so it's kind of frustrating to read through. Just a few, they're going to do some studies on deer survival in places of the state with the highest wolf population density. So I'm sure we all can kind of understand what we think is going to be found in that study. Mm-hmm. They're going to do a study over in Fond du Lac to kind of get an idea on deer movements and what deer are doing there before the elk show up. Yeah, that's where the elk are supposed to be relocated. So they're going to try to get an idea of what's going on there. There's a walleye study going on with the different strains of walleyes in Minnesota and trying to find some adaptive management plans for warming water. The last few years, we've either had earlier springs or not as cold a winter. So we've seen warmer water temps faster. And so how does that affect things? And then an expansion of the awful wildlife watching program, which we did a story on for Prairie Sportsman. We got a bunch of cool trail. We didn't have actually a gut pile. We had a carcass that we were able to put, a couple carcasses we had out. And really cool project. Same thing. We'll put the link for that in the description below. Otherwise, you can go to the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel and find it there. Trying to see what's eating gut piles and scavenging off kind of a new food source. Yeah,
it was really interesting. When I found out about that, I thought for sure there was going to be a correlation to lead usage by deer hunters out there and what's ingesting lead, because that's been a topic. But no, what they were trying to find out is what effect this new food source, an introduced gut pile to the environment, what that food source did to the ecosystem, what ate it, what relied on it, what ate that instead of something else. It's a really interesting story, and they're using some citizen science, and you can be a part of that project too if you go to the Awful Wildlife Watching Project's website, and it's Awful, OFFAL. It's very interesting stuff. And Dan, overall, all these things that the Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund is funding, all these projects, this is when you have a cash-strapped DNR, this is an incredible source of funding to learn more about what's going on in the environment. As people that love to hunt and fish like us, this type of funding can't come from anywhere else, really. The amount of money that's available, and for those that don't know, the Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund is funded by lottery ticket sales. So it was, if you remember last year, there was a vote up for it. You voted for it to continue it. I think it passed with almost 80% approval or something like that. To
continue the constitutional protection of it, at least.
So that money goes towards all these projects, and it's every 2 years. There's a proposal process. It's really rigorous. They vet all the people behind it. They make sure that all these proposals are going to benefit the environment in Minnesota. And it's a great program. And then LCCMR is who determines who gets funded. So the Legislative Citizen Commission of Minnesota Resources. So it's part legislators and it's also part citizens. So there's oversight in how that money gets spent. It's one of the great programs in the state of Minnesota.
Scott Mockatoon called it the tax on those who are bad at math. Playing the lottery. So it's literally, it's not a tax. It's money from people who don't understand the odds of gambling.
It's awesome. It's great. So anyway, some good news there from the special session. And they started at 10 a.m. on Monday and they were scheduled to go to 7 a.m. They had to finish by 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. And I think they were done by way before that. Like, they surprisingly got everything done much faster than everybody expected them to.
Yeah.
So.
And before we move on here, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is largemouth and smallmouth bass fishing is going to be continuous now.
Right.
That's really cool news. I think we're still probably going to have season dates for a harvest season, but most people in Minnesota aren't harvesting bass anyways, so it's not a big deal. Honestly, maybe we won't. Maybe it will be a harvest season year round. I doubt it, but it might be.
No.
We don't know yet. But either way, that kind of follows suit with what some of our neighbors have done. Obviously, the Dakotas don't really have fishing seasons at all. Wisconsin went to year-round bass fishing, and now we're going to have it here. So good news for all you bass anglers in Minnesota.
Our bass are not in trouble.
Not at all.
Not have an issue.
We have some of the best smallmouth fishing in the world, really, between Mille Lacs and Leech and the Boundary Waters and Vermilion. But we have great largemouth fishing. Talk to a lot of people from down south. Yeah, we might not get 8, 9, 10 pound largemouth, but people love largemouth fishing or just bass fishing here in general because of the amount of quality fish we have, the amount of 3 to 5 pound bass we have in this state in a bunch of different lakes, and you can go catch 50 of them in a day. You don't do that all the time down south. People don't realize that. So
and
people love coming here.
And it's easy. Excuse me.
Oh, enter a tournament.
No, then it gets hard. It's funny. Anytime we try to catch bass for fun, we smash. And then anytime we need to do it for a camera or for a contest or something like that, all of a sudden bass get tight-lipped. I don't understand it. All right. One other thing we should mention too, Dan, is we talked about the muskie study, some of the research that's going on, not only in Alexandria, but the big one on Leech Lake. And somebody responded to our clip on Instagram or something like that?
Yep. Baylor Short, he's part of this project through Bemidji State. He reached out and he's going to go back to his team and see if they can maybe get an instructional video, because that was one of our concerns, is if we'd have people getting a muskie in the boat and taking too much of a fin off or screwing something up and harming these fish. So he went to his team, or he's going to his team, and he's going to try to see if they can get a video done. And if they do, we'll be sharing it throughout all our channels. You'll see it right here on this video podcast and on our social medias too. So if you're not following us on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, if you're on TikTok, you're missing out on some content.
Yeah, check it out
Some
and
news.
Follow us and subscribe. And don't forget to go to the YouTube channel as well, Fish Hunt Forever and Sporting Journal Radio for that matter. Subscribe to both of them. But we got a brand new video on the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel from our time fishing with Brandon Hunter down on Kentucky Lake. He shows us how he likes to fish, what he likes to use, what gear, where he targets largemouth and smallmouth. And yeah, we're on Kentucky Lake, so if you're going to go there, you can get some tips on where to find fish. But if you just like to bass fish, particularly topwater, you're going to be able to utilize some of these techniques anywhere you go. So check it out now on the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel. We got a great interview with John Bergsma and Joe Henry coming up, and I hope I'm going to see if he'll tell us this World War II story, Dan. We're going to ask him and see. I don't know. It's one of those things, like, it was a pretty personal story. Some people don't like talking about that stuff in public. I don't know if he's ever told this story on TV or on the radio or podcast. I don't know if he's ever told this story publicly before. So we'll see if he'll tell us the story about D-Day and his father when we come back. This segment brought to you by Trails End Outfitters in Tobin Lake, offering black bear hunting in the spring, whitetail hunting in the fall, and of course, legendary Tobin Lake walleye and pike fishing, guided ice fishing, and then during the summer, you can just rent the lodge, rent the cabin right on the shore of Tobin Lake and bring your own boat and do some fishing. It's a pretty easy drive right up there to Tobin Lake from here in Minnesota. We do it all the time. And find out more at trailsendoutfitters.com.
Now is the time to start thinking about chasing big walleyes on Devil's Lake. Get on the fish at Haybale Heights Campground and Resort. Haybale Heights makes it easy for you to make memories on legendary Devil's Lake with guided fishing and lodging packages. Or bring your own boat and rent one of their cabins on East Bay. Haybale Heights offers a private marina, fish cleaning station, and the opportunity to relax and enjoy your bucket list trip to Devil's Lake, North Dakota. To book your trip, visit haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com.
All right, now we're going to head up to Lake of the Woods to check in with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism. And Joe, how's it going, first of all? But you got a guest there. You're not alone right there.
I do. Well, you know what? We're going to be filming tomorrow, Bret. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to get John Bergsma with Great Lakes Fisherman's Digest. It's a TV show that airs nationwide. John is not only a former professional walleye trail professional angler, but he's got a TV show that he films 52 weeks a year, which is, anybody that does that is pretty much crazy.
Certified.
But I thought it'd be kind of fun just to hear from John because, John has really a neat history with Lake of the Woods. He's fished tournaments here. His traveling partner when they would fish tournaments was Brian Nye, who's one of the owners of Adrian's Resort. And Brian in himself is an extremely accomplished angler. But I thought it would just be fun to talk to John and, hear about his history with Lake of the Woods and just his travels and such.
Yeah, and Joe, we'll get a fishing report from you in a second, but I want to talk to John. That's no offense, but
you talk to him all the time, right?
First of all, I don't know if you want to say anything about this. You told us an amazing story off the air, and I don't know if you want to tell it on the air or not. But since it was just June 6th, we should just. I know your father's no longer with us, but man. Thank you for his service on behalf of us, because that story you told is unbelievable.
Yeah, I'll just quick whip through it. My dad was a Royal Canadian paratrooper in World War II and jumped on Normandy June 6th. And long story short, he was a high school senior that back then they had the opportunity to opt out of the second half of their high school if they could test out of it and if they were 18 years old. And he turned 18 on January 11, 44. So he was a senior and a really good track athlete, and he tested out. And, if it's luck or bad luck, he tested out, passed all of his courses, and of course went on. And he wanted to be a pilot, but they made him a paratrooper because he was 6'4", and they didn't think he would fit in the cockpit very well. So, he got sent over to jump on Normandy, and everyone knows the story of the Canadian paratroopers at Normandy. The winds blew their aircraft to the wrong side of the lines, and they ended up getting dumped a couple, 2-3 miles inside the lines, and 2/3 of them died, lost their life, unfortunately. But my dad broke his ankle. His jumping partner that landed close to him shattered his forearm, and took him 3 days to crawl to a little town called Bayern, France. And they got rescued by the advancing allies in that little town, probably that had just become occupied. The guys who rescued him said that town had just been occupied an hour before they showed up, crawling through the high grass,
oh my
beat
gosh.
up. So, yeah, the rendezvous point was 72 hours, and took them 73 hours. And they were crawling with maps. I mean, when we're talking maps, we're not talking maps like today with GPS. You think, let's go find a spot and fish. No, we're talking about hand-drawn maps, that if you see this farm that looks like this, and, landmark maps, like the way, we used to find spots on the lake. We're fishing out in front of the white cottage, and if you line up the 2 trees to the left of the white cottage, there's a little hump there. Well, that's kind of how they were negotiating the woods through, all the pain of their injuries and everything. So it was kind of an amazing thing. And, it's just, like I said to you, it just shows the grit and determination of that generation that was before us, that they really, you had to do a lot to knock them boys out. They were tough cookies. And I appreciate my dad telling us that story. Only told it to us once.
Amazing.
And that was it.
Absolutely amazing. And you were saying that they didn't want to get to the town too early because it might still be, controlled by the Germans. But if you got there too late, the Allied forces might not even be there anymore.
Right. And that's exactly the dilemma for them. They had to pace themselves. They could only crawl when there weren't when they knew there weren't patrols, and they ditched all their paratroop. They stripped right down to just their clothes, left their guns because they were injured. Both of them had broken bones, and they were going to be slow, and they calculated their crawl to be like 12 miles. And then they figured they'd go 4 miles a day. They'd get there in 3 days. The rendezvous point was 3 days. And so they got there, 73 hours, an hour later. And sure enough, they said the Allies, the guys who were wandering, on a patrol, were talking about World Series. And so, of course, my who was going to win the World Series that year? It hadn't happened. It was only June, but they were talking about it. And of course, that was the tip to my dad and his crawl partner that, hey, these are Americans. They're speaking
amazing. English
and they're talking about the World Series. So then they waved and made themselves known. Of course, half got killed doing that. And then the state realized they were Canadians. They got them off to the medical tent and got shipped back home for quick repair. But it's crazy. They got there literally. The guy who rescued him said, well, we just got here an hour ago.
That's amazing. Absolutely incredible. Could you imagine, Dan, I know 18 years old, parachuting into, accidentally parachuting into enemy territory.
Oh yeah.
Your brothers that you're serving with are getting shot in the air on the way down, and you land, you break a bone, and then you ditch your gun and crawl through enemy territory for 3 days. It's absolutely an amazing story.
Well, they went through training actually, and they actually told them that you wonder about what do they get training for. And then they had this big tower. My dad, when I was 8 years old, we took a drive from northern Michigan all the way across on the Canadian side, all the way to his hometown of Vancouver, BC, little town called Surrey, which is right on the Fraser River. And we stayed there for a month to visit all of his relation. But we actually stopped at the camp, and I think it was in Saskatchewan, where a massive tower where they had these guys literally just run and jump off of it and then pull the ripcord. And that's how they practiced. And like Joe said when we were talking before, this isn't some glider parachutes. These boys come in at 50 miles an hour, and if you don't have the right angle, they teach them to hit, roll. I mean, it's like football, linebacker tackling practice. There was no, I'll just gently. No, they had no controls like that.
You had to come in fast, because if you floated too much, they shot you in the air.
They did. They'd shoot you in the air.
You had to come in fast. And, and I think what you said is because they were 3 miles, that glider got pushed by the winds 3 miles into German territory. So now when they're drifting down, the Germans had spotlights on all the soldiers, and they were killing them in the air.
Oh yeah, they were shooting them, and it was bad. And this is all documented. Not his story per se, but I don't know that anybody has ever documented his story, because you know what? There's so many stories like that. That's what we said. My dad would say to me, and did say to us, what we did was nothing special. We just stayed alive. But truthfully to us, who are the recipients of what they did, it's something special, all right.
Absolutely amazing. And I mean, did they have food? Did they have water? I'm sure they jumped with something.
Canteen. They had their canteen, a couple of ration bars. That's all they had.
Amazing.
But they were athletes. That's why they were paratroopers. That's what they were told. The one reason they were at paratrooper camp is because they were athletic, because they were going to send them into some bad situations. And you were going to be on your feet with nothing more than your weapon, your bodily functions, and your brain, and you better use all three.
Wow. He only told you that story one time. How old were you?
Yeah, he could only sit us down and tell us that once. He never talked. You hear so many people from World War II say that. It's hard sometimes for me to talk about it because it affects me that much, because it affected them that much. They couldn't speak about it, not because they were under some dictate from the government. It's because it was so traumatic. And my dad, and another quick one, my wife's name is Betsy. Her dad was a navigator on a B-24 Liberator who flew 25 missions. Anybody who knows anything about World War II knows that a B-24 Liberator may be the worst aircraft in the world as a bomber is concerned. You shoot it, there was no protections. The hydraulic lines were all exposed, he'd tell us. And you could shoot it with a 22 and it'd go down because, you get a hydraulic line, you're done on a B-24. You can't steer. None of the rudders and flaps. Anyway, he somehow flies 25 missions. Then they ask him, Harold is his name, Harold Brom, hey, we need people. He gets done in late 44 with his 25th mission. They said, do you want to fly anymore? And he looks at him like cross-eyed, like, hey, dude, are you out of your mind? So they stick him on, but he's a navigator on a bomber. So you have to understand, my my father-in-law was a Christian, a religious person. He struggled inside mightily because he's flying the airplane into the target zone, if you get what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
So he knew what was happening below, and he struggled with that. He struggled with the whole morality of it, the purpose of it, all of that. There's a point to the end of this story. So in late 44, they said, dude, we need aviators bad. We're losing pilots so fast. Help us out. We'll pay you double pay if you stay here in Germany and fly non-combat missions as a navigator. We need bodies. So he says, okay, I'll do that. If it's just transport missions, in between held territories in a non-combat zone. So he agrees to that. He ends up sitting there at the end of the war, and they come to him and said, hey, we'll continue to double pay you if you'll stay after the war. So this is after the war is all done. And he says, okay, I can do that. So this whole time struggling mentally, like we talk about PTSD, so many of these people had trauma in their lives. And he told me this story one time, just once, and he could barely speak. And so what happened to him is funny how God works to help people out, because his last mission in Germany before he went home was, they said, hey, we need you and your crew to fly some prisoners from over to Nuremberg for some trials. He says, all right, no problem. I can do that. Back then, the situation was the MPs would load the prisoners onto the planes that were going to the Nuremberg trials. They'd secure them. They'd walk up to the cockpit and they would turn that prisoner over to the captain of the plane. They'd stick their head in and say, Captain, the prisoner is yours. Secure your prisoner. He was already secured, but they wanted to know that they were not responsible for anything once they walked off that plane. So the captain was doing pre-flight check, and he had already began it. So he looked at my dad-in-law and said, Harold, go check the prisoner. And he walks back there. Now imagine this guy who's struggling with guilt, right? He walks back there. He goes to secure the prisoner. Who do you think he has on board? Hermann Goering.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. Looking straight into Hermann Goering's eyes. And he said he had so many emotions he couldn't even tell us. But in a moment, he said he reached down, he grabbed the security straps, he tightened them another quarter inch, looked him straight in the eyes, and said, Sir, I'm flying you to your just reward, hell. And that was the end of the story he told us. And he said he walked to the cockpit. He never had an ounce of guilt again.
Wow.
Not one. Because he saw that he had purpose, Mm-hmm. It was a full circle for him. And that shakes me up even now,
Oh, man.
That's
just
amazing.
That's a crazy story.
That's a crazy story. My dad's story and his story. And you know what? There's tens of thousands of stories like that. They all went through stuff like that. They all went through it.
How old were you when you heard these stories?
Oh, my dad was almost dead. He told none of us. My dad told me that story when he was in his middle 40s. My dad-in-law told me that story after I'd married my wife when he was in his low 70s, and he wanted to get it off his chest. And my dad had no sons. He had 5 girls. So he sat me and my brother down because my brother married my wife's sister. So there's only 2 men in the family, 2 brothers. And he knew my dad had been in World War II and went through some tough stuff. And he thought, I can tell these guys, I can get this out, you know.
What a privilege to hear that.
Oh, yeah. It changed I'm a history buff now, you know.
Well,
one of my post-retirement trips will be I'm going to go to Auschwitz. I'm going to go to all those places.
There's so much history there. And
there's so much to remember. That's what my dad would say. There's so much to remember.
Yeah, we talk about freedom not being free.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, holy man.
Yeah, all day.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I know we are going to talk fishing on the show, I promise. John Bergsma and Joe Henry with us here on Sporting Journal Radio. We're going to take a break, but we're going to talk Lake of the Woods, and we're going to talk about your show as well when we come back.
Sick of eating tag soup? It's time to own your odds this fall with OnX Hunt, the GPS hunting app trusted by millions of hunters. Now you'll have access to nationwide public and private land ownership information, waypoints, optimal wind for each stand, tracks, and much more. All at your fingertips. Go to onxmaps.com/hunt and use code SJR20 at checkout to receive 20% off your membership. That's code SJR20.
We're back on Sporting Journal Radio. Our guests, John Bergsma and Joe Henry here. What an amazing story. Thank you to all the veterans that are out there, current and active, of course. Very appreciative of people out there protecting America and Canada, for that matter. And John, as you were telling us off the air, you've got some roots in Canada as well. You got some dual citizenship. As I told you, I was 1 year away from, they changed the rule from 2 generations to get dual citizenship, since my grandpa was born in Canada as well too. And I would have liked to have had that. And you were you born in America? You were obviously born in America then, but you traveled back and forth?
I was born in the fine town of Hampton, Iowa. It's somewhere in the northeast corner of Iowa. I don't know where it is. I moved when I was like 40. I do remember fishing off of a train bridge. It was my first fishing memory. And I caught a sucker.
There you go.
I know this creek is called Beaver Creek, and it's a train bridge over Beaver Creek in a little town called Ackley, Iowa.
Well, it makes good sense. 3 years old fishing off of a train bridge. It's all comes together.
Yeah, with no life jacket. So much has changed.
You were hardcore back then too.
All 4 of us boys were sitting on that train bridge, and we had to hold on when the train went over it. My mom says, remember to hold on because the bridge rattles. That's the difference between that generation's parents and mine. Oh, my gosh. My mom would send me to the gravel pit with a Zepco 202 and a lunch bag and tell me to be back by 5. I mean, I could have died 6 hours ago, and she wouldn't have known, you know?
That's hilarious. Well, that beaver, there's a Beaver Creek down in southwest Minnesota too. That must be the same one crossing the border that down there. And maybe
I don't know. It's in It's in Ackley, Iowa. I know that's the little town I lived in.
So that began a lifelong love for fishing, and you got into television. Tell me about your TV show.
TV show was a result of I did 20 years on the in-fish professional walleye trail from 1990 to 2009 when the Lindners sold it. I decided it was a good step away point. I had done it for the whole time, and I think there was 17 of us, Perry Good and of course Gary Roach and others that had done every tournament for day one to the end. And I went up to the Central Upper Peninsula, bought 20 acres of land on Big Manistee Lake, built a huge resort, 30 Lakeview homes, bar, restaurant. Thought I wanted to be a resort owner because I watched my friend Brian Nye from Adrian's do it and thought if he could do it, I could do it. And then I realized this is way more work than I wanted to ever do if you're a resort owner. But I got lucky and was able to sell it at a little bit of a profit. And then I thought, what do I want to do? And I thought, I'd like to be a TV show host. I'd like to teach people what I love. And, but I did it kind of the only way you can anymore is you can't go to iCast and sell people what you don't have. And so I self-financed the whole first year of my TV show with no sponsors, no commercials, just 24 minutes of content, and built an interesting 13-week segment and had it professionally filmed and paid the money for that and bought the airtime and put it on the air and aired it. And
that's not an easy thing to do. The first TV show I ever did, we went to SHOT Show and ATA and tried to sell it before it was on the air, and everybody just kind of laughed at us. So,
right. That's exactly right. And so I dropped probably 100 G's that first year with no sponsors, but I went to, obviously Garmin here, and I went to some other boat manufacturers who knew of me and my tournament career and that I could catch fish. And I think that got me a long ways in getting sponsorship. I sold all the sponsorships the first year. 6 of the 8 people said they bought sponsorship because I actually made a TV show and didn't have any sponsors. They were so stunned that they said, okay, we'll give this a whirl because this guy obviously isn't a quitter.
Well, yeah, and it shows initiative. And it shows that you're going to go out there and do it, and you're going to find a way to make it successful no matter what,
And that first year we were on World Fishing Network for 13 weeks. And now we're on CBS Sports Network, the big national one. We're on Pursuit Channel. We're on Sportsman's Channel. And we're on 7 big locals, big market locals like the Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo area, Detroit, Flint Bay City, Saginaw, Traverse City, Cadillac, the whole Upper Peninsula. So we've got Michigan covered, and we've got the national presence on 3 of probably the 3 most major national networks in CBS, Pursuit, and Sportsman's.
Wow. How many years ago was it that you started it?
I started it in 2015. I filmed the show in 2015. And then began airing on first week of 2016. So this is our 10th year. And basically, Jimmy Linder told me if I'm around 3 to 5 years after I start, I'll probably make it. He was so comforting.
That's funny. Yeah, that was the same time that we started that first show, and we didn't go to iCast that year, but we went to the other shows at that same time, and had a bit of a struggle, and we were on Fox Sports North, and it was $100,000 to be on Fox Sports North for 26 weeks, and we ended up only doing 1 season. And then I joined this other TV show. Now I think we're on our 10th season with this other show. So it's worked out. But
I would not tell people to do it the way I do it.
Well, because it's expensive.
Oh, it's expensive. And try to tell your wife, I'm going to go spend $100,000 on fishing and I may not make a dime.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and to do it 52 weeks a year. I'm surprised you're still married. I'm not going to lie.
Well, yeah. Well, that's because I came after 20 years of tournament fishing. So you figure if they stay around through a tournament career, they'll probably stay around.
That's great. So what can people, what should we expect on the show? What do you do?
It is multi-species. It is not just catching fish. Oh, I caught another one and let's throw it in. And it's not over edited. It's what you see on this interview. It is plain straight out fish, and almost every one of the comments I get from my viewers is, John, I feel like I'm in the boat with you. Half the time I spill my beer or my coffee because I'm laughing at something you say, and and they feel like they're there. But I also fish real lakes. I film only 1 show in 1 day. There is no compilations from, I filmed a show. I was there 3 days and we got 9 nice fish. No, what you see in a day is what you get with me. And I tell people what I am doing, where I am at, exactly what depth I'm at. I'll tell you my coordinates. Heck, fish have tails. They swim. What good's it going to do to that guy? Anybody who comes behind me. That's why when fishermen say, I don't want to give up my secret spot, and I look at them cockeyed and go, what are you talking about? The fish is going to be gone tomorrow afternoon. Just tell them, So that's kind of what I do. And I've had I teach concepts. I teach concept fishing, set these general colors of these lures out there, try to match the colors to the lakes, try to understand how watercolor can help you choose the right lure color, and then use your graph, buy good electronics, use it, try to figure out side scan, try to figure out good areas that hold fish and the best ways to catch them.
That's not only are you putting pressure on yourself to do 52 weeks a year, but if you're only doing one day to get a show in, I mean, what happens if you don't catch a fish? I mean, you're probably
you do what we're doing right now, because I went fishing today and we sucked. It was blowing sideways, though, in all fairness. It was blowing 20 to 25 miles an hour. So
it's still fishing.
We caught a 20.5-inch walleye. I caught a 16-inch walleye. We caught a couple of saugers, and that's just, more expense money. You check that one up, learning experience, go back tomorrow and do it again.
I didn't get up for Bret till this afternoon. John was going to go out with Brian, his buddy, and Brian's son, and they just went out to do a little fun fishing, to do a little exploring. But it's pretty windy today, so they couldn't get out real far. And our big day to shoot's tomorrow. We got one day. It's supposed to be sunny. Supposed to be decent weather. The wind's going to pick up in the afternoon, so we kind of strategically figured out where we're going to go and what shoreline and what points would kind of cover us for wind. And we got a game. So
all right. Well, there was your problem, John. You didn't have Joe up there with you.
I know. Every time he gets in the boat, we end up getting a show. Yeah. Now, sometimes he talks so much it drives me insane, but that's okay.
Hey, 2 ears and 1 mouth. You have to listen twice as much as you speak.
Well, maybe that's why we've had Joe on every week for the last 12 years or 14. How long has this show been on the air? 13 years?
I don't know. You're the one who runs it.
Oh, my gosh. It feels like a lot
never
longer.
A shortage of words with Joe.
We have a good time in a boat, I'll tell you what. But I think it'd be kind of fun. John, tell listeners your history with Lake of the Woods and Brian and I.
Oh yeah, so I start fishing the PW. This one will crack you up too, Bret. You'll figure out I'm maybe the strangest TV show host in the world. But
hang on. We got 60 seconds. If you want to,
60-second John Bergsma.
Or you can save it and we can do it in the next segment. Is it going to take longer than 60? All right.
Yeah. Everything takes longer than 60.
This is great.
Well, I'm not touching that one.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not touching that one.
The minute I said it, I realized, there's a couple of things you can do.
A stud from Michigan.
That's hilarious. All right. Well, let me ask you this before the break, and then you can tell that story. You're filming with Joe. So when you say you film and put out 52 shows, are you turning them around right away? Like, when are we going to be able to see this Lake of the Woods episode?
Well, we do 26 shows for 2026, the first 2 quarters, and then the last, starting our filmings in mid-June, are all going to be a 2 to 3 week turnaround. So once we get to Q3 and Q4, then it's quicker because we get off of CBS Sports Network, where you don't have to have such a big lead time.
Sure. Man, that tight turnarounds is so tough, and sometimes it's hard just getting stuff ready to be on the air so far in the future too. John Bergsma and Joe Henry with us. We'll have more with these guys and a great story when we come back. If you want to catch a big walleye, go where the big walleyes are. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world, with a variety of resorts and lodging facilities offering full-service fishing. Lake of the Woods is also home to sturgeon, sauger, perch, trophy pike, muskie, smallmouth bass, burbot, and more. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods today. Go to lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com. All right, we're back. Sporting Journal Radio. John Bergsma and Joe Henry are our guests, and we are going to get some Lake of the Woods reports here for you. But we got you before the break. You teased a little story for us that you got to share right now, John.
Stupidest thing ever. So I'm sitting in 1989 watching a fishing show, and I see this commercial come up for the Fisherman Professional Walleye Trail. And I was a janitorial service owner, worked 7 days a week for 11 straight years without a day off, from the time I was 19 till I was 30. So I'm watching this commercial, and my wife's sitting there. She brings me coffee. She sits down next to me. And I looked up at this, and I'd been an avid bass fisherman my whole life. And I said, you know what? I've always heard walleye were tough to catch. I think I'm going to go do that circuit this year. It's only 4 stops. I mean, the BASS is like 20 stops. I can't do that. She looks at me and says, have you ever even walleye fished in your life? And I said, no, I've never even caught one. But I said, what a better way to learn. So I sent my entry fee in for the Infish. I show up at Mobridge, South Dakota on May 1 of 19. I have never caught a flipping walleye in my life. I bought a Lund boat. I didn't ever own any deep V type boat. So anyway, quickly condensed, it's a pro draw. So what a lucky dude for the first year. If you check back in 1990, they had no co-anglers. So pros would go with pros. And so the way it worked is the one pro would get the first half of the day, the one pro would get the second half of the day. You flipped a coin to see who got what. And so I just decided, seeing as I knew nothing, I practiced fish for 4 days and never caught a thing other than a zillion smallmouth bass, because that's what I was good at, big northerns. So I decided that I was going to defer control of the boat to the pro for the morning, which everybody was good with, you know. And then if they wanted to, they could also control the afternoon.
Oh, perfect.
I had every pro looking at me like it was sideways. It's like, is this guy stupid? No, he's smart. He doesn't know his butt from a hole in the ground. I mean, it just, I finished 18th in that tournament. I went to school so fast on those suckers. I was tying stuff on and looking at what they were fishing with. Oh, minnows. Okay, I'll buy some. So the next day I show up with a bucket of leeches, and I mean, and by the second day I'm just like, okay, I can do this. This guy's going slow. He's long line dragging a lipstick lure, you know, Northland lipstick jigs with a sucker minnow hooked through the snoot, and I paid attention to what the angle of his line was and everything. Oh man, before you know it, I was in the money. It was hysterical. And I cashed 3 checks in the first 4 tournaments. In the very first year I fished, I had never caught a walleye.
So did you do that in each tournament then? Did you just let the pro run the boat all day each time?
In Winnebago, I met a kid in the bar named Matt Jacobson. Well, anybody who knows anything about Winnebago knows that Matt Jacobson in the 90s might have been the best raw river rat jig fisherman from the Winnebago area. Even Mike McClellan knew who Matt Jacobson was. Matt Jacobson says, "Hey, dude, I love watching you on stage. I think you swore one time on stage." I let him slip and he had to bleep it out. He goes, "I'll tell you what," he says, "I'll give you some of my secret spots," he says, "but you're going to laugh when you see him." So I cash I think it's a 5th place check my first year in Winnebago. And you know how I cashed it? Slip bobbering 18 inches below a slip bobber in a 3-foot hole that was 12 feet off of shore. And I fished there all 3 days. He says the fish just swim down the shore and they get to this depression and there's rocks on both sides. And he says they get to this depression and they just lay in there. And I figured this out by casting these shorelines. And so he says, if you just sit there and do nothing but lay a slip bobber in that hole, he says throughout the course of the day, 3 or 4 walleyes to swim through. And as you know, in Winnebago, it's a tough bite. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Ploutsy won it in the cane, you know, jigging, you know, dabble jigging in the cane. And I sat there and what do you know? I catch 9 walleyes, but I mean, they're all 3 and 3.5 pounders, dandies, you know, and I'm in the top 5. And, you know, Ron Linder's saying, "John, we got to do an interview with you. You're a good stick." You know, I didn't dare tell the dude. This is like the 50th walleye I've caught in my life.
So you go to the bar the night before the tournament. That's a good way to get some of that intel. You can't do that anymore, I don't think, in some of these tournaments. They get mad at you for the local info. No. But do you remember?
I'll tell you what, the bite on Lake of the Woods, according to Brian, my buddy, has been fantastic. So guys are jigging. I'll let Joe finish it, but what I know from talking to Brian Nye is he's told me that they're jigging all over and just basically running from the wind, Joe.
How'd you get to know Brian Nye?
Oh, how did I get to know Brian Nye? Well, he met me in the first tournament. Brian doesn't talk. Anybody who knows Brian knows he just doesn't talk a lot. You know, he's a phenomenal fisherman, but he doesn't talk a lot. But same thing. I met him in the parking lot, and I talk a lot. And so I tried to talk to him, and finally somebody said to me, "I don't think that kid talks a lot." And I says, "Oh, I'll get him to talk." And I went over and talked to him, and lo and behold, he came back 2 tournaments later, and he wanted to be my friend, you know, because he said, "You know what? You know, You're funny. That's what he said to me. Dawn, his wife, then said, yeah, you make my husband laugh. That's why he likes you. And that's how it started. And we ended up, rooming together. And I think the biggest thing that was good for Brian and I is we did not lie to each other. I would tell him the best spot I had, GPS coordinates, presentation. If he beat me, he beat me, and he did the same thing to me. And so we legitimately started to figure out how to accumulate information throughout the course of a 5-day pre-fish that actually mattered. And when we blended that together, we could come up with a pretty good pattern. And I think the other thing was Brian's just a stupid good fisherman, and I think I was okay. And, so if you get good information and a good fisherman, you end up with fish.
Bret, and Brian and I, if Adrian's here, Adrian's Resort on the Rainy River, Brian's very, very respected. When you go ice fishing, as an example, there's a number of resorts that go out of Adrian's Road, and Brian really is the gatekeeper. He is the gatekeeper of that, and so many resort owners and ice guides and such look up to Brian and look for him for wisdom and knowledge at this stage of the game. And just another one of those, guys from Lake of the Woods is kind of a, in the fishing world, an unsung hero. We have others. Brian's one of them.
Yep. Sure. Yep. I agree with you. He was born on that river, in that lodge. So, he knows nothing but that river. That's his life. If it's not safe, he'll tell you.
I've heard stories where, people are looking for advice for Brian on ice conditions and things. And, I remember one story where Brian took 2 quarters. He put one on each side of the crack. And they waited for a while to see if those quarters would separate, if that ice was moving. And that's how he determined what was going on with a certain pressure ridge. And just, I can go on and on, but it's kind of a neat story. And Brian isn't the only one, but he is one of them, definitely around our lake. That is just really a kind of a legend around here.
Well, if you're going to be born somewhere and grow up somewhere, on the Rainy River at Lake of the Woods is a pretty good place to do it because, people catch a few fish around there, Joe. And I know this year so far has been red hot up there.
It has, yeah. You know what? It's been a jig bite, and things are starting to transition a little bit. Yep, people are still getting them on jigs, but those spinners are starting to kick in. And normally on Lake of the Woods, you pull that spinner, Bret. You're using a hammered gold blade or gold combined with another bright color. A 2-hook harness with a night crawler. Now, there are times where this time of year especially, you might want somebody in the boat to put on a minnow, because sometimes pulling a spinner with a minnow can really get some more fish, and then everybody would adapt if that's the case that day. But it's been a good bite. We've had everything from dragonfly larvae hatches going on, so there's fish biting in 12 to 14 feet of water in some parts of the lake. We still have fish that are out deep in that 24 to 28 feet of water. People are out in the deep mud hitting those. We got fish over rocks, but the cool thing is they're catching fish all over the lake. And when it's real windy, some of the charter boats they'll get you out, they'll get you fish, and they'll get you out and get you fish. But not everybody can go where they want to go, so you have to adapt with going to a leeward shoreline or fishing the Rainy River, or maybe tucking into some bays like 4 Mile Bay or Zippo Bay or Bostic Bay. But you know what? There's always fish to be had on Lake of the Woods, and even on the Rainy River, Bret. We've talked about this. I remember. In fact, it was Jim Kelkofin, the former director of the Professional Walleye Trail. He said, I was up there to Lake of the Woods, and it was a really, really windy day, and nobody really was going to go out. And right away, some of the guys we were with, just on a fun trip, they went to the bar. And I said to my son, hey, let's just go fish the Rainy River. And we went just fishing the shoreline, dock to dock, and then you'd have a little feeder stream coming in the Rainy River. And he says, geez, by the end of the day, we had walleye, saugers, perch, smallmouth bass, pike. It was an incredible day of fishing. And we were just fishing stuff we've never fished before. But that's how it is up here. There's enough fish around that you can put a good day together normally if you go after it.
Walleyes, of course, the main thing up there, but people target bass. So, John, if you want to relive some of your glory days with the bass, you could find some up there.
Tell Bret what you guys were talking about on the boat today. We're just about smallmouth bass fishery up here.
Oh, it's stupid is what it is. And we should film a show. That's what I told Joe. I says, why aren't we not paying me to come up here and film a show for bass? I can actually catch them, and it's like, I can tell you quickly. So Brian Nye has a young tail ender son named Odin. He's got 2 actually, Odin and Andy, but Odin's about 8. He's in 4th grade. And I'm telling you what, you don't want to fish against that kid in about 10 years.
He's a stick, isn't he?
He is a stick. He sits on the Adrian's docks. Well, basically any dock is his now from the launch south. Downstream, and he works dock to dock, and that kid comes in with walleyes and smallmouth. He's caught sturgeon. He's crappie fishing. Oh yeah, that one over there. No, not that one. That one right there. That's got crappies on it. He'll know. I mean, he knows. He might as well. He says I'd mark him, but then people would know, so I don't mark him. I just remember. But yeah, he's out there just, and he said the same thing Brian said to me, is that he said you can stand on those docks and throughout the course of a day, you can catch walleye, smallmouth, and crappie consistently.
Oh, I believe
They're
it.
in there. Yep.
I believe it 100%. And every year we talk about trying to just go fish off the dock, and we never do. I don't know why we never do it, but usually because we're on the water all day and then probably working after that, I suppose. That's the excuse.
Yeah, right. I know some charter captains who, when they get their boat all ready to go nice and early, and they're waiting for customers to come down, and usually it's an 8:00 departure. They'll take a jig and drop a jig down in between the charter boat and the dock, and they'll jig it, and they'll catch big smallmouth, they'll catch nice walleyes before the trip even takes off for the day.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome. Well, it's a lot of structure there.
Fishing addicts have to have a fix, so there it is.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, there, if you got some depth, there's a lot of structure along the river right there with all those docks. So I'm not surprised at all. And then when you got the
breaks and.
Yeah, when you got the minnow traps out there, you see walleyes. Obviously, that's more during the run, but you see fish come up there and eating those minnows all the time. All right, guys, we'll let you get back. John, thanks for coming on. Thanks for telling those stories. That's great. I know you talked a little bit.
What's your website?
Website's fishermandigest.com.
GreatLakesFisherman'sDigest.com. And Joe, if people want to plan a trip to Lake of the Woods, what should they do?
Yeah, it's a great time to come up. Check out our website, and that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.